It is indeed afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second Research Rodeo at UBC. My name is Dr. Bob Belton. I'm an Associate Professor of Art History in the Faculty of Creative and Critical Studies, and I am your MC for today's events. This is Celebrate Research Week on campus, and the Research Rodeo is one of the key events helping us raise the profile of our researchers, undergraduate and graduate alike, and to celebrate the discoveries and enhancements and advancements they are making in the world of knowledge and our knowledge of the world. To say a few words about research here on the Okanagan campus, I would like to invite to the podium our Vice Provost of Research and Dean of the College of Graduate Studies, Dr. Miriam Grant. Dr. Grant.
Thanks, Bob. Howdy. No, you're all a little nervous, so we'll get going here. I get blamed for the cowboy hats and the rodeo theme and all this because I moved here from Calgary, and this is actually Calgary weather for May, so we'll blame them. So today we're going to have some fun and we're going to learn, and what we want to do is provide you with a view inside some of the research conducted by our undergraduate and graduate students. Our theme this week is Research Resonates. So we know that one discovery, an innovative idea, can change the world, striking a chord, reaching out, triggering even better and bigger ideas. Imagine the transformative impact of thousands of discoveries, innovations, and deeper understandings. That's our vision at UBC, and it's becoming a reality here in the Okanagan. Research is a central component of UBC's mandate as a public university, and we're doing great things with that mandate. Over the past year, our researchers have received nearly $12 million supporting more than 480 projects. Our students and profs are answering critical questions here at home and literally around the globe. Today's competition, Research Rodeo, is a sampling of that student research. So we wish you all the best, competitors. We congratulate you on your research and, of course, your willingness to share with us what you've learned through this. Back to Bob. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. We're now ready to get going with the Research Rodeo, which is set up in two parts. Allow me to explain them. We're going to enjoy presentations from 9 undergraduates in this session. Later this afternoon at 2 o'clock, 12 graduate students will also present the research. In each case, that clock will be ticking. Each student has 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, with just one slide to support their presentation. Not all students have opted for slides, but all have unbounded enthusiasm for their research. You will see that they all have great knowledge and passion, and their intent today is to engage the judges and the audience by communicating their research to the best of their abilities. First, let me introduce our distinguished judges for this afternoon. In the center of our panel, Rebecca Zandbergen, host of CBC Radio 1's Radio West afternoon program. Thank you for coming, Rebecca. On her left, our right, Dr. Wesley Pugh, Provost and Vice Principal of UBC's Okanagan campus. Thank you. On Rebecca's right, our left, Kirsten Kane, Manager of the Office of Research Services. Thank you for coming, folks. Our official timekeeper is Nancy Darling, Director of Academic Operations. Where is she? There you're over there. And our official tabulator is Derek Gratz, who is the Associate Director of the University Industry Liaison Office over there somewhere. Welcome all. A few notes about the rules. All participants are currently enrolled in degree programs here on the Okanagan campus. Each presentation is allowed only one slide, no animation, movies, props, or pin numbers exchanged. Presentations may be up to 3 minutes. 3 minutes! 3 minutes long. We are very grateful to the Kelowna Running Room for their use of their large clock for the competition, which I assume is in fact a clock because running with that on your wrist would be difficult, I'm sure. When the presentation reaches 2.5 minutes, the timekeeper will display the caution sign, indicating that 30 seconds remain. At 3 minutes, the stop sign appears, and the whistle blows. No further remarks are allowed after 3 minutes have elapsed. As usual in these competitions, the judges' panel decisions are final. What are they going to be looking for? Well, as you watch these presentations over there, folks, keep in mind that students will be judged on 3 primary criteria. Communication style. Was the thesis topic and its significance communicated in language appropriate to an intelligent but non-specialist audience? 2, comprehension. Did the presentation help the audience understand the research? 3, engagement. Did the oration make the audience want to know more? We hope you will pay keen attention to the presentations because everyone in the audience is invited to vote for the People's Choice Award. Ballots for this award are available at the table at the door, and this is the same location that you will place your completed ballots, and we strongly encourage you to do this. The students love to get this kind of feedback, plus there's a prize. The ballot scores will be tallied following the last presentation. I should also notice that this event is being streamed live, I'm telling you all specifically, to a worldwide audience via the internet. If you weren't already nervous enough, just keep in mind you'll only be this big, okay? We thank everyone in IT, media, and classroom services for their great assistance and support for the Research Rodeo. So what do you think? Let's get started? Okay. Your first Research Rodeo undergraduate presenter is Natalia Hatala. Why Performance Matters, Community-Based Arts in Kelowna.
Everyone just take a deep breath in and out. Hi everyone and welcome. Thanks for choosing to be here with me. I am Natalia Hatala. I am a Western Canadian tree planter, as well as being one of the first fleet of graduates in the Interdisciplinary Performance Program at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan. So in November 2012, I created and facilitated several free community-based workshops. These workshops I created, I titled as a series, the Looking Sideways series, and the first workshop was how to conduct the forest. The second workshop was how to behave like a golden retriever. And the third workshop was how to move like a rock. I have only 3 minutes, so I'm going to focus on the first workshop from September 12th, 2012, how to conduct the forest. In my world as a tree planter, trees, rocks, the animals, the birds, the few brave birds that make it out onto the cut block, are sometimes the only friends that I have. And as such, I consider them valuable and valid members of my community. And I draw strength, support, and information in much the same way that I do from the collaborators and friends that I have back home. So, fortunately, animals, vegetables, and minerals can't talk, as many of you well know, as also some of the more vulnerable members of our community can't talk. At least they don't speak English that we understand. So therefore, no amount of talking or gum flapping to the trees will induce conversation. I do find that if I slow down and listen, they're more than happy to share their knowledge. So, and I'll explain how, just talking about the workshop process. So it was simple. People come into the workshops, we warm up, we get the blood flowing from root to tip. I figured I was going to get people to start with a meditation of sorts. And I thought sticks probably wouldn't fit at the Alternator Center for Contemporary Art, which is where I gave the workshops. So I thought, well, maybe we should trees wouldn't fit in the gallery, so sticks probably would. So I had people stop and put themselves in positions as a stick that they could recall kind of somewhere in their memory. And I had them hold this position and just wait for whatever would arrive. Wow! So I'm going to read one participant's writing from this workshop. Brittle yet solid, once connected to a home, to root and to the earth, now lying on the earth lifeless. It was a little bit melancholic, the stick thing. So we moved along, we went up to Knox Mountain, and I had people engage with their relationship with the tree. How much of a relationship can I have in 8 seconds? So what is it to conduct the forest? A conductor is both a leader and a follower. As Rosemary Thompson, the conductor of the Okanagan Symphony, said, I'm always reaching to be just a hair in front of them.
always difficult to go first. So thank you, Natalia, for taking that one on the chin. Our second presenter, Antonio Kim, will speak to us about synthetic collateralized debt obligation using different probability models. Mr. Kim.
Thank you. I don't like microphones, so I'm going to talk naturally. Anybody hear me? Okay, perfect. So thanks for coming. My research is specifically on the 2008 financial crisis. There have been many explanations of why the financial crisis occurred. Some would say it's the corporate greed of all banks, or the capitalism itself that led to the collapse of the financial market. But there has been a correct answer. And in my childhood, I learned that if you're not getting the right answer, you're not asking the right question. So my question in regards to research entails what happens to synthetic CDOs. And synthetic CDOs are financial derivatives that were used mostly by the banks. And my research entails mathematical modeling all the probability using synthetic CDOs. Oh, they can't hear me. Unfortunate. But, so, for most people who don't know what the CDO is, CDO, or collateralized debt obligation, is when you pack a bunch of debts together into one, slice them into different sections, and sell those sections to different investors. Now, investors get paid quarterly premium, but if all the assets are defaulted, they lose all the investments. So what happened was, the real story is that the investors were pension fund retiree funds, and the defaults on these assets were mortgages. My research is based on how they price these CDOs. In finance world, the assumptions are overly simplified. That means that they use normal distribution to measure the risk of each assets. But however, there has been suggestions that these do not really work. And they have been suggestions that there should be a different distribution to use. So what I did is I used the student T distribution, which has fatter tails, higher probability, and the prices should have been higher for investors, which wasn't. Which means investor thought, this is a great investment. I'm going to buy more of these CDOs, which they did, and when the mortgage crisis happened, investor lost all the monies. So in reality, they're paying low premium for high risk, and they gamble with it, and they lost all the assets. And because of this, pension funds and business lost their money, and banks such as Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. So why is my research important? Well, other than the whole financial meltdown, longest recession, and Great Depression, and the highest unemployment rate since 1930s, it isn't. But my research is important because I ask more questions. Would investors not buy these CDOs if the prices were higher? Why wasn't there oversight in the derivative markets? Why did banks make simple assumptions to the probability? These are the questions I've been asking myself after the research. But yet, I have realized maybe I'm not asking the right questions. Thank you very much.
I will encourage everyone to speak into the microphone because that's what's pumping it out onto the interweb. Our third speaker is Kayla Lorac, who will speak to us about matchmaker or matchbreaker motor unit recruitment and discharge rates between strength-matched males and females. Kayla.
Everyone here knows that we depend on our muscle every minute of every day. But have you ever stopped to consider what our muscles themselves depend on? Surprisingly enough, our muscles depend on more than just calories to perform a movement. Our muscles depend on what are known as motor units. Every day we use these motor units, from simple tasks such as combing your hair in the morning to harder tasks such as running after your kids at night. Motor units are crucial to our everyday life because they are the final aspect at which we can control force and movement of our muscle. There are thousands of these little guys in our muscle, and it's up to them to decide how smoothly we perform a movement. Without motor units, muscles just wouldn't work. So, what is a motor unit? Motor units originate in the spinal cord, and as seen by the image behind me, a motor unit consists of a single motor neuron and all of the muscle cells that motor neuron excites. In order for a motor unit to control force, it will alter its rate of activity, or additional motor units might become active. Think of this as turning on more of your muscle in order to increase the required force that you will need in order to overcome that heavier load. The control of this force produced by your active motor unit is known as force steadiness. Studies have shown that the stronger you are, the steadier you are. And therefore men, due to the fact that they are just naturally stronger than women, are steadier than women. But only one other study has investigated force steadiness in men and women that have been matched for strength. The fascinating result of this study was that once women were actually matched for strength with men, women were found to be steadier and ladies had the upper hand. This led me to the question, do motor units contribute to the differences we see in steadiness between men and women? How did we investigate this question? Well, I'll tell you. Subjects were seated in a chair designed to specifically measure force. Men and women were then matched for strength based on the maximum amount of force output that they could produce, as seen by the image on the bottom right. Drawing your attention to the image in the center of the slide, electrodes were placed on the surface of the skin and used to measure electrical activity of the muscle. We also inserted 2 wires into the muscle, which allowed us to record when motor units became active and the rate of that activation. Subjects then targeted forces relative to their previously calculated maximal force output. There is one more subject that we have to test, but based on preliminary inspection of the data, I hypothesize that when women are of equal strength, they will be steadier than men and will recruit less force. You might ask, how is this research relevant to you? Well, we all have parents and grandparents, people we care about in the aging population. By identifying the contributors in strength steadiness difference, we can determine whether strength training is an effective means by which we can increase steadiness, especially in older women, reducing debilitating events such as falls, and increasing their overall quality of life. Thank you.
I'm going to have to ask Kaylee later where she got that photo of me getting out of the shower. I wore a long-sleeve shirt today because I couldn't get the green paint off. Our next speaker is Carrie Simpson, whose work is entitled Stretching Sex Effects, Length and Angle Matter in Muscle. Carrie.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. So it seems like when we think about exercise, our first thought is just random confusion. What the heck is going on? We hear confusing things about cardio. We hear confusing things about strength training, but we don't hear much at all about stretching. So what I looked at was how stretching affects the muscle and the tendon unit in the gastrocnemius, which you can see in the top middle there. See, we hear things like we should eat our vegetables, and then we shouldn't because they have pesticide on them, and then we should exercise every day, or then take a few days off, but we don't hear a lot about stretching. Maybe it's because it takes too long, or maybe we just don't make time for it. Whatever it is, stretching is like the flossing of the exercise world. We only do it when we know it's going to be checked up on. So we used ultrasound, which you can see in the bottom right there. That's a screenshot of the gastrocnemius. Again, you can see it up in the top middle. We used ultrasound to track the changes of the muscle and tendon unit. The tendon was the Achilles, which you can see in the top middle. So we took men and women. We got them to do a maximum plantar flexion. For those of you that don't know what that is, that's pushing on your toes as hard as you can, or a maximum toe point. Then we subjected them to a maximum stretch in the opposite direction, got them to pull their toes up towards their shin, and held it there for 2 minutes before we reversed that and got them to do the plantar flexion again. We used the ultrasound to track the mechanical changes, and we also used electrical stimulation, which you can see up in the top corner there on the leg, to make sure the person was maximally activating their muscle. So our preliminary results are really cool. You can see here in the bottom some of our results. Initially, we believed that women would be about the same for men for stretch. Maybe it's just because women tend to stretch more, but we saw that women tend to have a lengthened tendon after they stretch. So in this graph, the women are red and the men are blue. The first set of bars is the pre-stretch, and the second set of bars is the post-stretch. So you can see there's a significant change in the female tendon where there's no change at all in the male tendon. What does this mean? It means that women tend to absorb the stretch into their tendon. Now, really interestingly, men showing no change in their tendon didn't affect their muscle fibers because they showed a change in their muscle fiber length where women didn't. So although they were subjected to the same perturbation, men and women absorbed the stretch differently. What this means is if a woman went into the gym, decided to do some stretching, and then started to do some force production, she would first have to take up the slack that she created by the stretch in her tendon. Then if a man went into the gym and did the same thing, he wouldn't have to take up the slack, and in fact, he put his muscle fibers in a better situation to produce force. So what can we take away from this? Well, if a woman stretches, she may create sag in her tendon that decreases her force production. Whereas if a man stretches, he might be doing himself something great. So get to yoga, boys.
Sarah Smith is up next, and the title of her talk is Association of Host Microbiota with Host Obesity, Insulin Resistance, and Type 2 Diabetes. Sarah.
Okay. Exactly 1 week ago today, Carolyn Gaute from the University of British Columbia released a study highlighting obesity rates across Canada from 2000 to 2011. Part of her project was to include obesity maps, like the one, well, exactly the one that you see above me here. And if you look at the top left legend, you're going to see some different percentages where we can compare obesity rates from province to province across Canada. Now, a general trend is that we're seeing that obesity is increasing across Canada over the last decade. And obesity rates are highest in the Maritime provinces and in the Northwest Territories. Now, British Columbia is not out of the woods. Our obesity rates have increased from just under 20% to just under 25% over the last decade. Now, across Canada, 1 in 4 adults and 1 in 10 children are diagnosed as clinically obese. And this is a big problem because there are a lot of diseases associated with obesity, such as cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, stroke, musculoskeletal disorders, and even some cancers. Obesity and its related diseases cost the Canadian healthcare system $6 billion annually, so this is a big problem that we need to address. Now, in the developed world, we normally associate obesity with an increase in caloric intake and a decrease in physical activity. But researchers are now looking for other explanations to explain how and why the obese state occurs. One of the things that I'm interested in is bacteria. How on earth can bacteria be related to obesity? Well, it might surprise many of you that we have over 100 trillion organisms living on our body surfaces. And our body surface includes anything that's exposed to the external environment. So that's our whole gastrointestinal tract. Now, the most dense bacterial populations are found in our colon. And our colon's bacteria is called the gut microbiota. That's how I'm going to be referring to it for the rest of the presentation. Now, our gut bacteria normally help us. They do things like stimulate our immune system to keep us healthy, and they also digest certain food products that we can't get at our own, so that we can actually get as many nutrients out of it as possible. That's called a symbiotic relationship where we're helping each other out. In an obese person, it's found that the microbiota is in a dysbiosis relationship. So there are some altered numbers that's affecting how an obese state occurs. The most exciting studies are looking at transplants. So we're taking obese mice and we're taking their microbiota and putting it into a mouse that has no microbiota to speak of at all. And what's happening is those mice that have obese microbiota are gaining a lot of weight. They are having an increased susceptibility to store fat in their bodies, and they have a decreased sensitivity to insulin, which is a hallmark of type 2 diabetes. My research is important because obesity is a major problem in the whole world, and understanding how bacteria fit into that can help us to understand how and why the obese state actually occurs. Thank you.
Our next presenter is James Beaton, who will speak to us about post-Fukushima prospects for nuclear power development in the United States, Germany, and Japan. James.
Good afternoon. If you had been standing along the coastline of Fukushima Prefecture in Japan on March 11, 2011, you would have tragically witnessed the sheer power of a 9.0 magnitude earthquake and 14-meter high waves. The resulting damage done to the Fukushima nuclear reactors constitutes one of the most critical nuclear disasters of all time, rivaled only by Chernobyl, 1986 in the USSR, and 3 Mile Island, 1979 in the United States. Now, we are obsessed with energy. According to the International Energy Agency, the world as a whole consumed the equivalent of approximately 9 billion tons of oil last year alone. As energy demand increases, many scientists continue to point to the production potential of nuclear energy. So then why is it not a more dominant source of our energy? The answer cannot be strictly a scientific one, and that's why my research incorporates two additional considerations: economic viability and political compatibility. Specifically, I compare the aftermath of the 3 nuclear disasters that I mentioned on policy decisions made by governments in Japan, Germany, and the United States. And what this does is it helps me to discern trends and factors that influence the making of energy policy. Now, as you can imagine, the scope of such a project is considerable. So what I'd like to do is share just 2 observations with you that I find particularly intriguing. First, a poll conducted after Fukushima Daiichi reveals that 63% of the Japanese population is opposed to building new nuclear reactors in Japan, versus 85% of the German population opposed to new reactors being built in Germany. And this shows that there are fundamental gaps in the political cultures between these 2 countries. And it helps us to explain why Germany is moving to phase nuclear energy out by 2022, whereas it is likely to remain an integral component of Japan's energy framework into the future. Second, public pressure on governments, depending on the structure of those governments and their relationship to industry, can actually force those governments to impose stricter regulations on the nuclear industry. And what this does is it makes nuclear more expensive and less competitive vis-a-vis alternative energy options. So in summary then, nuclear and general energy policy is a complicated animal, and we should expect it to behave differently in different contexts. We need to understand those contexts, not only the scientific factors, but also the political and economic factors that make up those contexts, so that we can make better energy policy decisions today. Thank you.
Thank you, James. We have a slightly updated title for our next speaker. Chris Heckle will deliver a talk entitled Discovery and Transfer of Knowledge of Vantage Points. Chris.
All right, so my research idea can be traced from Paul Gabios's 1988 experiment about the perspective ranking of cube drawings. On my slide, you can see that there are 4 cube shapes to the left, and in his experiment, he asked experimenters to ask participants to assume 2 different kinds of drawing systems. So for the first part, he asked them to assume that there is no perspective. And so, of course, the ranking system was then ordered that the fold-out would be first, the 2 squares second, the square and the rectangle third, and the 2 trapezoids last. And now when he asked blind adults to consider a drawing system with perspective, the 2 trapezoids were first, then the square and rectangle second, the 2 squares third, and the fold-out last. Now, the result of this experiment showed that the blind adults ranked types of perspective cube drawings in the same order depending on the drawing system asked to employ. Okay. From this experiment, I will ask whether it is possible for the blind, and comparatively the sighted, to discover and transfer knowledge of vantage point from one object to others, and if I can create a strategy to best bring about these results. I would first start with a haptic picture, which means a picture that you can feel the lines with your fingers, so that it can accommodate the blind. Now, I would sit down with the participants and show them a table. I would show them the front, and the front legs, and then the z-axis, which will be the slant, and then the back legs, and then, of course, the back edge of the table. And I would ask them afterwards if they can identify for me where the vantage point would be. And hopefully, according to that table, the vantage point can be identified on the top front right. And now after this, I would show them a same table, but with a different vantage point. And I would ask them to please identify the 4 different parts, the front, the Z, and where the 2 legs would be. And I would ask them afterwards where the vantage point would be comparatively this time. And hopefully they would be able to determine that it would be on the opposite side. And so that'd be fantastic if they can do that with this strategy. Next, to prove it even further, I would show them a cube, And I would not help them, I would not tutor them, I would just ask them, please identify it and tell me where the vantage point would be. And so hopefully they'd be able to do that, identify it from the right and to the left, and then I would combine the both to strengthen the experiment and to prove without a shadow of a doubt my strategy could help them. And so hopefully they would be able to point out the table and the squares with the same vantage points, either right or to the left, and to be able to identify a table with a box with different vantage points. Now you may be asking, why is it so important to be able to imagine or have a strong imagination for perspectives and objects and such like this? But I propose to you the idea that, well, it is often believed that you do not know your own language unless you know another. I propose the idea that you do not truly know the world around you, even something small like a box or a table, unless you can imagine said objects with such power and knowledge of perspective that you can get dizzy just imagining it from the front, through the back, and through the sides. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Garrettculos, who will speak to us about modeling temperature-dependent development of Maecenas. Garrett, come on up.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming. I'm going to talk about biological controls and invasive species, because that's what my research is on. So the bad guy in the picture, that's a plant known as Dalmatian toadflax. It's an invasive species. Now, invasive species are known to cause damages in the estimated range of tens of billions of dollars. So to control these problems, we sometimes use chemicals, but often they are ineffective. So we use biological controls. So in 1991, Maecenas, the good guy in the picture, was introduced to control this problem. What it does is it lays its eggs. The eggs burrow into the stems. They eat the marrow or the inside of the plant, and then they die. Now, this has been very successful in British Columbia, but hasn't been so successful in Alberta. Now, this lack of success has been thought to caused by Chinooks, so warm temperatures, increasing the ambient temperature of a region by up to 40 degrees for as long as 24 hours. Now, these Maecenas have what's known as a temperature-dependent rate, or a development rate, so they develop based on the temperature. So if the Chinook comes in, it'll change this developmental rate, thus altering the stability of the Maecenas' life cycle. So you can see in the picture that the stability in color can be shifted by up to 6 days based on a temperature. So if we look, the normal without a temperature spike or a Chinook that comes in, we have a stable oviposition date or birth day of the insect at about 150 Julian days, which is early spring. So if a Chinook comes in, it'll perturb their developmental rates, changing the stability and altering their life cycle. So we can see if a Chinook happens on the 100th day of the year, it can shift this stable oviposition date by up to 6 days. Now, this doesn't seem like a whole lot, but when they're coming out of their oviposition or coming out of their pupation state, and they're coming out too early, that it's too cold, they can die. And we'll see that this change in temperature is actually affecting their survival. So this Chinook is, in effect, killing a large percentage of the Maecenas population, making it much less effective in Alberta. That's actually all I have. Thank you for having me.
You will have noticed on your programs that there are actually 2 names listed. The second to last is not able to join us today after all, so we thank Tyler Dixon for putting his name forward. But our last presenter is Ashna Jessie, who will speak on how does ethnicity influence the perception of pain in others, a focus on Aboriginal Canadians. Ashna, come on up.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. Did you know approximately 1 in 5 Canadian adults suffer from chronic pain? You might be wondering, what exactly is chronic pain? Chronic pain is pain that lasts at least 3 months. It is associated with low quality of life, depression, and even suicide ideation and attempts. Within Canada, there are higher chronic pain rates within Aboriginal Canadian populations compared to Canadians of other ethnicities. So many factors have been shown to contribute to ethnic differences in pain assessment and treatment. In fact, pain assessment has been shown to differ by the ethnicity of the patient. For example, past research has found that people rate pain lower within ethnic minority groups, such as Hispanic, African American, or Asian groups, compared to Caucasians. Although Aboriginal Canadians report higher chronic pain than Canadians of other ethnicities, there's been very little research on how Aboriginal ethnicity affects pain assessment and pain treatment. So that leads to my research question: how does an ethnic label of Aboriginal Canadian influence pain assessment or a perception of pain in others? So within my study, which we are just finishing, participants read a medical case history. The patient described in the medical case history is experiencing shoulder pain. And now the key aspect of the study is that the ethnicity of this patient will be randomly assigned as Aboriginal Canadian or European Canadian. Participants will randomly receive one of these two medical case histories. So after this, a video is shown of a real patient who is actually experiencing shoulder pain. The patient rotates her shoulders and conveys her pain through facial expressions. The ethnicity of this patient is ambiguous. So again, the only thing we changed in the study is the ethnicity of the patient in the medical case history. So after viewing the video, participants will estimate the pain that the patient is experiencing. They also provide pain treatment suggestions. I will examine how accurately pain is perceived within the Aboriginal Canadian patient compared to the European Canadian patient. And also, will there be any differences in pain treatment suggestions? We will find out. So overall, this study will shed light on how Aboriginal ethnicity affects pain assessment and treatment. A goal of ours is to increase cultural competency of healthcare providers. It'll also be useful for family and friends of chronic pain patients. Finally, it can contribute to future research on pain assessment within Aboriginal Canadians. So thank you all again for coming. I'd like to give a quick thank you to Dr. Susan Holtzman and Garrettculos, my supervisors.
The judges have counted up their scores, and your ballots are all in, and we've counted them, so we have a number of winners we'd like to announce. We'd like to say, first of all, that we congratulate everybody for participating. Genuinely, it's a hard thing to get up and do, and you are to be congratulated for that. That said, the winning students will receive their awards during the Research Awards Gala tomorrow. Is it tomorrow or is it Friday? That's what I thought, yeah. At 2 p.m. If you're a winner, please attend the gala in the Admin Theatre 026 to be recognized and to receive your prize. It's my pleasure to announce our winners for the undergraduate event, receiving $100 each as the top 3 Research Rodeo presenters in no particular order are Sarah Smith for her talk on microbiota. Well done, Sarah. James Beaton for his talk on post-Fukushima effects. Well done, James. And Carrie Simpson for stretching. Congratulations to all 3 of you. And now the People's Choice Award. Thank you for participating, by the way, folks. This award comes with an additional $50 prize, and the winner is Carrie Simpson, once again. Well done, Carrie. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you for helping out. In a few minutes, we will begin the second half of the Research Rodeo with graduate student presentations starting at 2 o'clock. Please come back and join us for that process at the time. In the meantime, let's give our undergraduate students one last round of applause and our gratitude. Well done.